Over the weekend, Donald Trump's running mate JD Vance made a quick little campaign swing through the state of Pennsylvania, during which he spoke to local media, including reporter and anchor Tasmin Mahfouz of WGAL Channel 8. I remember her. She used to be a reporter and anchor at our hometown TV station here in Hagerstown, Maryland. Back when we had a hometown TV station. Anyway, I don't suppose that's relevant to anyone but me. The first question that Tasmin Mahfouz asked JD Vance was about the economy, and specifically about food prices that Pennsylvanians are dealing with and what he and Donald Trump would do about it if they get elected.
So I want to start with what's affecting our viewers every day, and that's, of course, the economy. Pennsylvania has been hit hardest by inflation. What's your administration's economic proposal? What are you offering to the American people to make everyday life more affordable again?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we have to recognize that inflation is particularly bad in Pennsylvania, particularly when it comes to groceries. The price of eggs in Pennsylvania is nearly $4 a dozen. Milk is $4.28 a gallon. And actually, Pennsylvania, for whatever reason, has suffered worse under the grocery price inflation than almost any other state. What we can do is really just unleash America's energy markets, because energy goes into everything, right? If you think about the cost of diesel goes up and the cost of getting groceries to the grocery store goes up, and that means the price of food goes up for everybody. And so I think if we do a better job of supporting our farmers and lowering the cost of energy, we can lower the price of food for everybody, but we can lower the price of a lot of other things on top of it. One of the problems with Kamala Harris's policies is she actually cast the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Explosion Act, which really sent prices on everything from food and housing through the roof. So you unleash American energy markets, you stop spending money we don't have, and you're going to make everything more affordable for Pennsylvanians.
I find Vance's answer there interesting for a couple of reasons, and I'll get around to the more interesting reason in a minute. But first, I just want to point out that this was not the only time during Vance's visit to Pennsylvania that the cost of eggs came up. In fact, he made a campaign stop at a grocery store where the cost of eggs in Pennsylvania became kind of the central idea of his remarks. And of course, there's video of that as well. Let's take a look.
First of all, it is wonderful to be here. Misael and Angelica, thank you so much for having us. Thank you for your incredible business, and thanks for being great leaders here in the community. It's a great place, and we're thrilled to be here. I do think, unfortunately, looking at the prices here, things are way too expensive. And they're way too expensive because of Kamala Harris's policies. I mean, look, yes, buddy, you want some eggs? Well, let's talk about eggs, because these guys actually eat about 14 eggs every single morning. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean...
Whoa. We'll be careful about this. Eggs, when Kamala Harris took office, were short of $1.50 a dozen. Now a dozen eggs will cost you around $4 thanks to Kamala Harris's inflationary policies.
You think his kids really eat 14 eggs every day? If most people had said that, I would give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that that was a joke. But with JD Vance, I honestly don't know. Anyway, in that clip, you see him holding a carton of eggs, and he says, because of Kamala Harris's inflationary policies, people in Pennsylvania are paying $4 for a dozen eggs. And to be completely fair to JD Vance, as the average price of eggs in Pennsylvania, that's mostly correct. The average price of a dozen eggs across Pennsylvania is around $4. But a lot of eagle-eyed viewers of that clip pointed out that as JD Vance said that, clearly visible behind him on the shelf of eggs at the grocery store where he was at that moment was a price tag indicating that at that grocery store, a dozen eggs cost not $4, but $2.99. And it's just an example of how bad at this these guys are. Donald Trump, JD Vance, their various surrogates that are going around doing these events, they just fail at this sort of thing on a basic fundamental level that is kind of alarming for presidential candidates at this level, where it's going to be either these guys or Harrison Walls. And these guys are still stepping in it and sticking their feet in their mouths over things that they really could easily avoid. He could have acknowledged the price tag. He could have said, well, you guys shopping at this grocery store are kind of lucky. Your eggs are only $3 a dozen, but the average cost for all your fellow Pennsylvanians is $4. Like, he could have easily worked it in, but he either honestly didn't notice because he doesn't pay attention to where he is, or he noticed it, but he had his prepared remarks and he had his talking point of, it's an average of $4 a dozen, so I'm just going to go with that. And it makes him look like a doofus, which he is, but he could have easily avoided looking like a doofus in this situation if he had just thought a little bit and improvised something to acknowledge the obviously different price tag behind him. But the more interesting part of his answer to Tasmin Mahfouz's question is when he explained that the reason why, at least according to him, according to his reckoning, the reason why food prices in Pennsylvania are so high is because fuel prices are so high. And he and Donald Trump are going to lower the food prices by lowering the fuel prices, by unleashing American energy, which is something that Republicans are always talking about. Drill, baby, drill, right? That's the whole deal. We're going to fix everything by drilling for more oil. That's going to fix all of our problems here in the United States in 2024. It's ridiculous, but that's what they always seem to want to do. And what's interesting about what Vance said there is it shows that he does have an understanding of the basic economic principles at play here. He says, well, the reason why food costs are high is because fuel costs are high, and food suppliers and distributors have to pay those higher food costs to distribute their goods throughout the state, and they pass those higher fuel costs on to the consumer at the very end of the supply chain, because that's how that works. If you have to pay more for fuel, then it costs you more as the company selling the eggs to get the eggs to the point of sale. So therefore, in order to recoup that expense and to make sure that you make a profit when you sell those eggs, which is the whole point of selling the eggs in the first place, you pass that cost along to the consumer. Costs to the company end up being paid by the consumer. It seems like he understands this. I think I understand it too. My grasp of basic economic theory is not what it might be. I was an English major in college, so the only real skill I have is being able to make myself sound smart. So please do your own research and verify these things on your own. But JD Vance says that. Seems to know what he's talking about in terms of basic economics. But that's not the same story they tell, he and Donald Trump, when they talk about arguably the central pillar of their economic proposal and what they want to do if they get elected, which is raising tariffs. Trump and Vance have both talked about raising tariffs, especially on China, on everybody, on all sources of imports, but on China specifically, or as Donald Trump calls it, China. He's going to jack up tariffs on China even higher than they are now. And both Vance and Trump have insisted that raising tariffs on Chinese imported goods would not result in higher prices for American consumers. And the thing about that is, that's wrong. That's not how tariffs work. There's a fact check article from CNN.com that I want to share with you that explains this much better than I, an English major with no background in economics, possibly could. This is from CNN, published on September 9th by Katie Labasco. Headline, Fact Check. Trump and Vance keep falsely describing how tariffs work. Former President Donald Trump and Republican vice presidential nominee Senator JD Vance continue to falsely describe how one of their major policy proposals, across-the-board tariffs, would work. Trump has falsely and repeatedly claimed that China, not U.S. importers, pay the tariff. And then from a little bit further down, we get to the meat of the matter. Facts first. Trump and Vance's claims about how tariffs work are false. A tariff is a tax that is paid by U.S. businesses, not other countries, when a foreign-made good arrives at the American border. One of the intended goals of a tariff is to raise prices on foreign-made goods. And study after study show that the duties do drive up costs for Americans. Not only do tariffs make things more expensive, that's what they're supposed to do. That's the whole point of a tariff. You impose a tariff on an imported good to try and discourage people from buying the import and therefore encourage them to buy domestic goods. That's the whole reason you apply tariffs to imported goods, to encourage people to buy domestically. The problem with that is, in today's global economy, there are a lot of things that we import that we have to import because we don't make them here. There is no domestic equivalent. Most of those Chinese goods that are being imported that would be subject to higher tariffs under Trump are not things that consumers could just avoid paying those higher prices by buying the American equivalent. There is no American equivalent. So the American businesses that pay those tariffs when they import those Chinese goods will then turn around and pass those higher costs as a result of the tariffs on to the consumer, just the same way JD Vance described higher fuel costs being passed on to the consumer. Ultimately, the consumer ends up bearing the brunt of higher costs for the companies. That's the way it works. And when Donald Trump says that's not the way it works, when JD Vance says that's not the way it works when it comes to tariffs, they are wrong and probably consciously lying. They almost certainly know better than this when they say this. They know that they are misleading people when they say, oh, higher tariffs aren't going to cost you anything. Higher tariffs apparently aren't going to cost you anything, but higher fuel prices will. How does that work? Seems to be an irreconcilable inconsistency, doesn't it? Seems to be kind of a double standard. But then again, the Trump and Vance economic policy is built on double standards. It's built on fantasy, just like most Republican economic policies are and have been for as long as I've been alive. Reaganomics, anybody. So it's not something unexpected from Trump and Vance, but I feel like it's revealing of their selective argumentation and their blatant dishonesty. They get it right when it serves their purpose. When they can say, well, higher fuel prices will lead to higher prices for the consumer, so we can lower fuel prices and therefore lower prices for the consumer. Okay, they get it right that time. But they get it wrong, probably on purpose, when it comes to tariffs. They can't say, well, if we'll raise tariffs, it'll raise prices. That's bad. So they say, we'll raise tariffs on China, but it won't cost you anymore. No siree. Trust us. That's just the way this works. Trusting them is a very, very bad idea on the economy and on anything else. Anyway, that's all I've got for you for now. My name is Steve Shives. I will be guest hosting for Jesse all this week. If you are not familiar with me and you'd like to become more familiar with me, if you'd like to see more of me than any reasonable person could ever wish to, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Steve Shives or follow me on my various social media accounts. Those are all linked in the video description. Also, don't forget, if for some reason you are watching this video and you're not subscribed to Jesse Dollemore's channel, subscribe to this channel you're watching right now. It's a great channel. You won't regret it. I'm not usually the guy. It's usually somebody better. But thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Don't forget, if you are one of my fellow Americans, we have an election coming up on November 5th. Please double check your registration. And please, 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 if you can do more, do more. But at the very least, vote. See you next time.
Here in the United States, we grant separate powers to three co-equal branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. Divided, each branch can better support the working of our government as a whole. Why shouldn't this practice carry over to the governing of our own bodies? Rather than allowing your branch and berries to stew in a single stuffy cesspool, well, why not divide so as to diminish your discomfort? Sheath Underwear is here to help you separate your church and your state. Sheaths are the only underwear with the dual pouch system scientifically designed to keep your executive branch separated from your judicial, if you know what I mean. Democratize your drawers. Head to sheathunderwear.com/Dollemore now and score 20% off right away. It was invented by a U.S. Army veteran while serving a tour in Iraq. The idea for Sheath arose from the discomfort that was experienced in these harsh environments. As a former United States Marine stationed in that part of the world, I get the inspiration. I wear Sheath every single day, and they are the only boxers that can agreeably accommodate my tree trunk thighs and keep my branches of government carefully compartmentalized. And I'm not the only fan out there. Sheath are recommended by multiple doctors and urologists and have over 20,000 five-star reviews. The airflow meshes, they're my favorite personally, but Sheath has tons of excellent styles and designs. And once you pick, Sheath will land them on your doorstep nearly instantly, thanks to blindingly fast shipping and amazing customer service. Also, your purchase doesn't just help you out. Sheath supports multiple charities like Socks for Soldiers and Doctors Without Borders. So you're making the world a better place too. Upgrade your undergarments right now. Score 20% off when you head to sheathunderwear.com/Dollemore and divide and conquer your discomfort with Sheath Underwear.